Okay, ready to dive into something a little unsettling.
Oh, lay it on me.
Microplastics. They're
Yeah.
everywhere, like literally everywhere. From the ocean floor to the air
Yeah.
we breathe to our dinner plates.
Yeah, it's true. These tiny plastic particles, less than 5 millimeters, think smaller than a sesame seed. They've become, well, ubiquitous in our environment and increasingly in our bodies.
I've read a bit about this.
Yeah.
Honestly, it kind of freaks me out. Like, how are these tiny pieces even getting inside of us? And what does it actually mean for our health?
Well, the main ways they enter our bodies are through what we eat and drink and what we breathe. Imagine like a plastic water bottle left out in the sun, right?
Okay, yeah.
Over time, it breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually becoming microplastics that can contaminate our water sources or even the air.
So these microplastics,
Hmm.
are they inherently dangerous on their own? Or is it more about where they end up in our bodies?
Honestly, both are areas of concern. The plastics themselves often contain chemicals like phthalates and BPA, which can leach into our systems.
Right.
And these chemicals are what are known as endocrine disruptors, meaning they can interfere with our hormones.
Endocrine disruptors.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds serious. I remember reading about them in connection with some health problems, but can you remind me what those are?
Think of our hormones as like a carefully calibrated system, like a complex orchestra with each instrument playing its part.
Okay, I like that.
Endocrine disruptors are like someone jumping on stage and banging a gong. Like they disrupt the delicate balance,
Yeah.
potentially leading to issues like reproductive problems, developmental issues, and even an increased risk of certain cancers.
Wow, okay. That really paints a clear picture. It's
Yeah.
not just about like tiny bits of plastic floating around in our stomachs. It's about the potential for these chemicals to disrupt our bodies at like a fundamental level.
Exactly. And it gets even more complicated because microplastics can act like tiny Trojan horses, attracting and binding to other pollutants in the environment, such as pesticides and heavy metals.
Oh, wow. So it's not just the plastic itself, it's also carrying other harmful substances along for the ride.
Precisely. And research has shown that these microplastics, along with their, toxic hitchhikers, can actually move from our digestive systems into our bloodstream.
So they're not just like contained in our stomachs, they're circulating throughout our bodies.
Yeah.
Where do they end up?
Studies have found them in various organs, including the liver, kidneys, and even the lungs.
Okay. That's pretty alarming. Is there any research yet on what this actually means for our long-term health?
Scientists are working hard to understand the full impact, but the possibility of long-term consequences from this buildup of microplastics in our bodies is uh, definitely a valid concern.
This is all a bit overwhelming, to be honest. It feels like we're surrounded by these like tiny plastic invaders and there's no escaping them. Is there anything we can actually do to protect ourselves?
Absolutely. It's not about, living in a bubble, but there are definitely practical steps we can take to minimize our exposure to microplastics.
Okay. I'm all ears. Like, what can we do to start reducing our exposure?
One of the most impactful things is filtering your water. Studies have found microplastics in both tap and bottled water. So a good water filter can make a significant difference.
Interesting. Are there like specific types of filters that are more effective than others at removing these microplastics?
Yes. Look for filters that use activated charcoal or reverse osmosis. These technologies are particularly good at trapping those tiny particles.
Got it. Water filtration is key. What else?
This one might surprise you. Pay attention to the fabrics you wear.
Wait, clothes. What do clothes have to do with microplastics?
Synthetic fabrics like polyester and nylon shed tiny microfibers every time you wash them. And these fibers make their way into waterways and eventually work their way up the food chain.
So those comfy fleece jackets and yoga pants are actually contributing to the problem? I had no idea.
It's true. Whenever possible, opt for natural fabrics like cotton, wool, or linen. They biodegrade naturally and don't release those persistent microfibers.
That makes sense. But let's be realistic. It's like hard to avoid synthetics entirely. I mean, what about, workout clothes? Are there any solutions for that?
There is. You can get a microfiber filter bag that goes in your washing machine. It captures those tiny fibers before they're released into the water system.
Oh, that's a great idea. I'll definitely have to look into that. I'm sensing a theme here. It's all about being mindful of the materials in our lives.
So you're catching on. Another major source of microplastics is single-use plastics. Reducing our reliance on these is essential.
I know I should bring my reusable bags and choose products with like minimal packaging, but honestly, it can feel like an uphill battle. Everything seems to come wrapped in plastic these days.
It's a valid point. We live in a convenience-driven world, but even small changes can add up. Opt for glass, metal, or paper containers when you can. Bring your own reusable containers for, like, leftovers. Start making those choices consciously, and it becomes more of a habit.
You're right. It's a mindset shift as much as anything else. What about personal care products? I've heard something about microbeads being a problem.
You're remembering correctly. Those tiny plastic beads that used to be in some scrubs and toothpastes and uh, body washes were a big contributor.
They were plastic. Why would they put plastic in those things in the first place?
They were used for exfoliation, but thankfully, many companies have phased them out, due to environmental concerns.
That's good to hear. But how do we avoid the ones that are still out there?
Always check the ingredient list. Look for products with natural exfoliants, like sugar or salt instead.
Simple enough. So far, we've covered water, clothes, packaging, personal care products. What else do we need to be aware of?
Here's one that often gets overlooked: the food we eat.
Hold on. Microplastics are in our food.
Unfortunately, yes. Contamination can occur through packaging, handling, and even during the cooking process itself.
So even if I'm doing everything right on the packaging front, there's still a chance I'm ingesting microplastics through my food. That's a little disheartening.
It is a concern, but here's the good news. Choosing fresh, whole foods and cooking at home more often can significantly reduce your exposure. And always make sure to wash your fruits and vegetables thoroughly.
Okay. That's actually pretty empowering. I can control what I buy and how I prepare it. Feels like I'm regaining some agency here. What else can you tell me about minimizing exposure through the food we eat?
Think about where your food is coming from. For example, seafood is particularly susceptible to microplastic contamination. Smaller fish lower down on the food chain tend to have lower concentrations.
Okay, so we've talked about water, clothes, food packaging, personal care products, and now even the food itself. Is there anything else we should be thinking about when it comes to microplastic exposure?
There is one more thing that often gets overlooked:
Okay.
air purifiers.
Really? We have to worry about breathing in microplastics too.
I know it sounds like a lot, but yes, microplastics can become airborne, especially in areas with high pollution levels. They can attach to dust particles and circulate in the air we breathe.
So is an air purifier really necessary?
It might seem extreme, but if you live in a heavily polluted area or you're especially concerned about microplastics, a good air purifier with a HEPA filter can be effective at trapping these tiny particles.
Okay, so we've got water filters, mindful clothing choices, reusable containers, checking labels, cooking at home, and even air purifiers. It's a lot to think about.
It might feel overwhelming at first, but remember, every small step we take to reduce our exposure to microplastics makes a difference.
You're right. It's not about being perfect. It's about making conscious choices and taking action where we can.
Exactly. And the beauty of it is that many of these changes are beneficial for the planet as well. Reducing plastic waste, using less energy, choosing sustainable materials. It all contributes to a healthier environment for everyone.
So by taking care of ourselves, we're also taking care of the earth. That's a pretty powerful connection.
Absolutely. Our health and the health of the planet are intertwined. What we do on a personal level can truly have ripple effects on a larger scale.
This whole conversation has been eye-opening. Who would thought that something so tiny could have such a significant impact? It's given me a whole new perspective.
That's the power of knowledge and awareness. Once we understand the issue, we can start making informed choices that lead to positive change, both for ourselves and the environment.
I'm feeling a lot more empowered now than I did at the beginning of this conversation. It's easy to feel helpless when faced with a problem like this, but we're not. We have options, and we can make a difference.
I completely agree. By taking action in our own lives, we not only protect ourselves, but we also inspire others to do the same. It's a collective effort, and every action counts.
Well said. Knowing what we now know about microplastics, what's one change you think everyone listening could make today to reduce their exposure?
If I had to choose just one, I'd say start by swapping out single-use plastic water bottles for a reusable one. It's a simple change, but it can have a significant impact.
I love it. Simple, impactful, and a great reminder that we all have the power to make a difference. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me today. It's been incredibly insightful.
It was my pleasure. Remember, knowledge is power, and even small actions can lead to big changes.